We're with Coach Jackson, Donovan Jackson, Northeast Guilford High School, and football changes the past week, and sometimes the changes are bad for some, sometimes they're good. For Coach Jackson, it's real good. First head coaching job, Northeast Guilford Rams. Coach Jackson, I know you're excited about this. You've worked hard to get where you are today, and as a young coach, you get a good start, and start with a very good school at Northeast Guilford.
Absolutely. It's very rare that you walk into situations with programs established such as this one. Coach Persley did a great job of just establishing the work ethic and helping them kids understand the expectations to excel in a elite program. And I walked right in and inherited a group of guys that were willing and able to work, motivated to work. And, you know, I think the sky is the limit for this team, contingent upon them doing what they need to do in the classroom.
And a lot of coaches like to hit the ground running, and is that the case for you? As soon as you got the job, got things signed up, did you go right at it?
Absolutely. You know, for the most part, I took over the strength and conditioning program. We've been going at it. I got them doing several different core lifts. I also included some Olympic-style lifts like push, jerk, and hang clean, and some other things that I felt would kind of directly correlate to their performance on the field. But as I said before, it was so many things that were already put in place. It was just a matter of just tweaking a little bit and making sure that the level of intensity was the same.
And you being a former lineman, you kind of look in that direction a lot. I know you've got a lot of good athletes here in skill positions down the road. This past year had some very quick wide receivers, pretty quick backfield. How do you assess, though, the status and state of your linemen right now? You looking at these guys as young high school linemen, many of them, and you being a former college and lineman in high school yourself. How do you assess the line situation here? Because I know that's an area where you really want to try to improve, because if you get that in good shape, the rest of it takes care of itself. The line is like the brick wall, the protective force for your team. And what about your line here right now as you look at it?
Well, right now we're fortunate enough to have 3 returners. We're currently trying to fill in 2 spots up front. All of these guys have experience in the triple option with Coach Persley. And, you know, from what I can see in the weight room, they also have that work ethic, you know, so I'm kind of confident in their abilities to do what I need them to do within this scheme. Just a matter of just getting stronger, keep working, and it's just going to all depend upon how fast they grasp my scheme, which I actually feel is going to be somewhat transferable to what they were used to in the triple option with Coach Persley.
And I think we go back maybe to Norfolk State back in the playing days, and contrary to what some people experienced, but a lot of coaches come in, I'm going to get these linemen in place, we're going to have a platoon system, guys go just one way, we'll have a group of offensive linemen, a group of defensive linemen. And sometimes even coaches this day are so specified they practice separately even in high school. But in your case, you played both ways in college, so you know both sides of the line. How does that kind of transfer to what you do as a head coach coaching at Northeast Guilford? Do you kind of break these linemen down and kind of set these guys apart as offensive linemen, defensive linemen, or some guys going to be in such good shape and so skilled they can go both ways?
Well, the shape part, that deals with me. You know, I got to make sure that these guys are cardiovascularly in positions where they're able to contribute, if need be, on both sides of the ball. At Norfolk State, I was fortunate enough to go into a program and start as a true freshman, and in which I started on both sides of the ball. We had a starter on the defensive side that went down, and as a result, you know, they tried me out in practice. I made 2-3 tackles back to back, and the rest was history. And it wasn't until our coaching change where I actually was solidified at right guard. But, you know, the expectation at Northeast will be we will train our linemen on both sides of the ball. For one, that gives us depth. And then for 2, it kind of gives us that mental toughness to the point where we know offense and we know defense, and it helps us prepare position-wise as we approach each competition.
Yeah, you see a lot of guys who know about the weight training part during the winter. See guys walking out of the weight room in the winter time after a hard workout. How do you do the cardiovascular part in the winter? Sometimes when there's no guarantee it's going to be decent weather outside, we can train outside with a running part, and some days you got rain, some days you got snow, whatever the case might be, some inclement weather. How do you get this cardiovascular part going in the winter time?
Well, I tell the guys, cold is not going to be an issue. You know, I anticipate on playing in the cold weather. You know, anytime. As one of my mentors, Coach B.W. Holt, used to say, if you're practicing on Thanksgiving, then you're pretty good. So you need to go ahead and get suited and get ready for those adverse situations, especially dealing with the weather. Rain-wise or whatnot, you will have some limitations, but for the most part, you try to do what you can do, and you hope that the environment will somewhat cooperate with your intent.
How do you get the kids' intensity level going, get the motor running? You don't really want to get them too intense, I guess, during the all-season workouts. Once the game time comes around, you can get these guys prepared, get them ready. How do you step it up and get these guys, get that motor running at full speed?
Well, what I try to do is I think there are lessons to be learned from prior experiences. And I think that this team this year understands the things that went right and some of the things that went wrong individually. Coach Pursley is a great coach, and I think these kids understood that some of the losses they suffered last year was a direct result of not being resilient, not handling adverse situations well as a team. And one thing I use is that as motivation, learning from their mistakes, showing them the film from last year and showing them what they did wrong last year and what needs to be done this year if that result will change. So it's just all in all, just kind of learning from previous experiences and using those experiences as motivation for the upcoming season.
And what about your system? I heard maybe you talked about a semester at one time, maybe some wing tee, maybe from you, or whatever kind of system you might put in place. What kind of system for the offense do you plan to run here?
Well, right now we're going to definitely run wing tee offense. I learned from one of the best I consider in North Carolina and B.W. Holt. Very, very diverse formations. Have the abilities to both run the ball and get some of your skill guys in the game as well. So we plan on trying to make sure that we collaboratively make sure that those guys in our skill positions can mesh and pick up that wing tee offense the way we need them to.
Is it similar in some ways to some of the option work they've been doing in previous years?
Well, it doesn't have the option phase. Some components of it will have the option phase, but up front is where the similarities lie the most, in the sense of, the blocking down and the kicking outs for your tackles and for your guards. It's going to be similar line play. The only difference will be in the option you're reading the outside guy, and if he squeezes, then quite naturally you pitch, and if he plays the pitch, then the quarterback keeps. That phase of the game will not be a portion of what we will do in the wing tee offense. We plan on just trying to, trick the defense and put them in uncomfortable situations by way of fakes and motions and handoffs.
Coach Donovan Jackson with us, new head coach, Northeast Guilford Rams. And what about your coaching staff? Got to get that in place now, too. Begin to put everybody in the positions where you want them to coach. How's that coming along, and how do you see that taking place?
Well, it's coming along good right now. I was able to retain some of the guys that did a great job for Coach Pursley. Right now, they're working really hard to try and make sure that we formulate a feasible plan for these kids. I have 2 holes to fill. I plan on filling them soon between now and the coaches clinic. DB coach, hopefully it'll be filled soon. And maybe one more offensive / special teams guy. I hope to fill that position as well sometime within the spring. But outside of that, we're going to be pretty solid. We have Coach Bob Vi, that was offensive line coach for Coach Pursley. He has several years of defensive experience. He's going to head the defense. And we're going to surround him with Coach Brian Avolio, that was a linebacker coach for Coach Pursley. He will remain. I hired a Northeast alum, All-American guy that played at Northeast and went on to play at Maryland and transferred and played with me at Norfolk State by the name of Dennis Marsh. He'll be a great asset to our defensive line. And, as I said before, we have one more position on defense to hopefully fill. Offensively, it'll be myself and Doug Smith that will be retained from the previous staff. Priest Everhart, that coached with Coach Rodney Brewington over at Smith, he'll be my quarterback coach. And we'll have Coach Pugh as well, who will be doing our fullbacks. That was from Coach Pursley's staff as well.
So things are starting to fall into place, and kind of an interesting way to enter the system here at Northeast Guilford. You were not in coaching, I don't guess, last year, but you taught here at Northeast Guilford kind of as an observer, looking over the program last year, watching the program. What are some things you were seeing that look good, some things you want to work on and improve upon as you get ready to be the head coach now? You take over the program, you've had time to kind of like some way sit back and watch it for a year, and now what are your thoughts going in?
Well, one thing I noticed, in last year I coached at North Forsyth. I was offensive line coach. Mm-hmm. And we actually was fortunate enough to play Northeast. And they jumped out on us 17-0. And, our guys didn't tuck their tails. We kept playing, and we was able to kind of get back in the game. We showed a certain level of resilience that I was proud of as a member of that staff. And it was, at the time, it was the complete opposite from our guys. And my guys, meaning Northeast Guilford now. The guys, adverse situations came, and I just seen the way they kind of broke down and melted down, and they just kind of was discouraged. It was up 17-0, and everything was fine. And once they, stuff started going the wrong way, they started making mistakes. And the one thing that I kind of put in as a mental note when I left that game, not even knowing how this would play out, was that, ultimately it would have to be a situation where them guys would have to understand what it means to be resilient, how to be able to handle adverse situations. Champions understand that in the midst of games there will be adversities, and champions respond to those adversities in the right way. So what I want to do as head coach is make sure that I challenge these guys on a continual basis to make sure that I put those things in practice where they're forced to respond, forced to be resilient, and they understand and fully prepared to face adverse situations.
Kind of finally for Coach Jackson, new head coach of Northeast Guilford Rams football program, the man in charge now here for Northeast. You look at the conference setup now, going to be a little different next year. Realignment's taking place. You got your area teams, kind of the neighborhood teams, get a chance to face Eastern Guilford, Northern Guilford, and several other teams from that Mid-State 3A conference, and that's going to be exciting too, I would think.
It will. One thing about it is, this conference reminds me a lot of when I was in high school. I played at Parkland High School, and we was in the Piedmont Triad 3A. And a lot of coaches would tell you that was one of the hardest conferences ever assembled, with the likes of Parkland, Carver, Northeast, Glenn, Smith, Dudley. And every year we averaged about 4 or 5 teams out of that conference that made the playoffs and was somewhat competitive. And I consider this conference to be similar. I think that if you can make it out of this conference, make the playoffs, you will be battle tested. So, everything that I kind of want to prepare these guys for is understanding that playing competition is not necessarily a negative thing. It's a great preparational tool for the postseason, which a lot of coaches, that's what we aim for, the postseason.
Yeah, and you go back with coaches like Keith Wilkes and D'Angelo Bell. I mean, that says a lot, just dropping those names out real quick.
Absolutely. Coach Bell coached me. I owe a lot to Coach Bell. I was a part of his only state championship 2001 team. And like I said before, man, those guys, when competition came about, Coach Bell made sure he prepared us and that we was able to meet those challenges. And as head football coach here at Northeast, I hope eventually that these guys can kind of rise to the occasion and accept those competitions like we did.
Hey, bringing in some guys maybe to talk to the kids, guys like Jed Bynes, yourself, and maybe your quarterback back in that day too. You're bringing those guys back around because your quarterback, I think, went on to play for Winston-Salem State. I mean, a lot of experiences. You've been down the football road, and it's been a good road for you over the years.
Absolutely. Monte Purvis is who you're referring to. And I actually, he's one guy that I was thinking about possibly bringing on, just depending upon how things work out. But all those guys, man, we had a special group. Wasn't too much expected from us prior to that season, 2001, and it was just a story of a bunch of guys gelling together, believing in a common goal, and week to week working towards that goal, and ultimately we accomplished it. We beat Shelby Crest.
I was going to say, who'd you beat in the championship? It was Crest, and that was a team that was heavily favored going into that game. You guys beat them pretty handily too. I listened to that game on the radio that day on WSJS 600 AM on Winston-Salem. You guys put them away and took care of them in a big way.
Absolutely. People don't know this, but one of the starting linebackers for that game for Crest was Brandon Spikes.
Yeah.
He was a freshman.
Gator, right?
That Crest team was extremely talented, but we just had the mentality we refused to lose. And a lot of that was an attribute to Coach Bell and him preparing us all throughout that year for that, just those mental aspects and being confident in our abilities.
Last time I checked, I think he had a vacancy on his door right now because of the Parkland job he'd left there. Any chance you might bring him in for 1 year sabbatical joining you guys?
Well, it's definitely been talked about.
Yeah.
I would never leave Coach Bell out of the loop. Right. I think a lot of them, and I'll often consult with him on different things from a mentor standpoint. Right now, I think Coach Bell is just trying to get settled in, trying to figure out whatever his future endeavor will be. And if I have an ability to help him out, man, he knows I'll be more than willing to do it.
It's always interesting, too, to see a former student be able to go back and talk with and associate and maybe help out a mentor. That's always a good thing, too, and that's what you're trying to do now, coming in being a mentor to these Northeast Guilford Ram players, and you're in that position right now that you were actually in yourself just a few years ago.
Absolutely. Like I said before, Andy, this is a really big blessing for me. I've been working tremendously from my time in Rocky Mount with B.W. Hope to my time with Rodney Brewington to my 3 years as assistant head and co-offensive coordinator at High Point Andrews and working under Pete Gilchrist at North Forsyth. I was able to kind of work with an eclectic group, and I was able to take things from each group to kind of, form who I am as a coach. So I think that each guy was able to give me something that I will be trying to utilize this upcoming season.
Well, Coach Jackson, good luck to you. Great talking. We now learned a lot about you during our discussion here, and can't wait to see what the Rams are going to be doing this coming season, especially, again, taking on the likes of Eastern Guilford, Northern Guilford, and several teams here locally. Looking forward to the season with Coach Vi helping you on the defense and other names you've dropped in, mentioned for us today from the Rams staff from last year, new people you're bringing in. Sounds like you're off to a good start. Just hope these kids respond. We feel like they will. Just keep working hard. Keep up the good work.
Absolutely.